got Stuart Scheller here ready to do our interview that has been highly anticipated. As many of you guys have followed this story. So going through it, you've asked for accountability. I just watched your Joe Rogan, your Jocko podcast, and I found out you're an accountant, and I was like, that's probably why he likes the word accountability so much. Coinciding right there. So
yeah, anyone that wants to go into accounting, I wish them well, but I did not enjoy it. And I went into accounting because I wanted to be an FBI agent, and accounting is monotonous work.
It's counting beans, quite literally. So, I was looking back at your YouTube because I always like to dive into social medias. I like looking at stuff. And, this, in my opinion, was not the first time that you were critical of the military. If I look back, you were talking about the perfect ribbon and you were doing that. And you were like, the military doesn't really give anything for those guys at 15 years at that midpoint where you're kind of that friction point of you're stuck, but you can't leave. You can't jump off ship yet. So I would say you've always been kind of critical. Would you agree with that?
That's a great question. No one's actually gone back and looked. There was, so yes, I was doing, the reason I started social media in 2018 was because I launched the Perfect Ribbon. So I didn't have any social media before 2018. And so my followership was like a couple thousand on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn were my three things. Mm-hmm. And it was all based on my entrepreneurial efforts. And so my big pitch, like there's still a video on my YouTube about why I think active duty should be involved in entrepreneurship. I think it gives them purpose. It gives them passive income, and it mitigates the steep drop off in purpose and things when you get out. Now there's certain things you can't do, like you can't run a restaurant as an entrepreneur, but there are other things you could do. And so, yeah. And so once I did that and I had the YouTube, then I started, like, if you go back, I made a video about General Kelly's son that was killed that I knew real well, Robert Kelly. And in the Afghanistan withdrawal, I started getting real frustrated watching it play out real time. And I made a post about how my teachers, as I was growing up, always told me that violence was never the answer. Mm-hmm. I was like, I wish some of those teachers were in Afghanistan right now to see the depths of their misguided worldview, because there's absolutely a time that violence needs to be imposed on evil when they're not listening to reason. And so you're right. I had kind of started to throw some stuff out there since 2018. Nothing obviously to the level of once I made that first video criticizing the Afghan withdrawal and asking for accountability. But I think, having gone from no social media, like I probably need those couple of steps in there where I was like slowly starting to kind of like prod them. And it got to the point where then I was like, I was comfortable enough of posting that video just in terms of the small steps I had already taken.
Yeah. Awesome. I will have to ask this too, because, it sounds like you're pretty business savvy. Do you feel like your accounting background or interests might have piqued you kind of looking at your entrepreneurial endeavors moving forward? Or has that just kind of been something that spurred as you spent time in the Marine Corps?
I think an entrepreneur honestly can come from any background. You could be a professional like an accountant, doctor, lawyer, or you could just be someone without a degree that is, wants to go out there and be a mover and shaker. Sometimes wisdom doesn't necessarily come from a degree. I'll tell you, I think my entrepreneurial desires came from my father. He left the corporate insurance world and started a brokerage firm and did very well. And then after that, he started a vacation rental little empire down in Cape Coral. He's got about 10 houses down there. So I watched him. He's just always, his secret is he just works. He works all the time. And so he basically outworks everybody. And so I watched that. I watched how well he did. And obviously, if you haven't figured it out, I get to a point where I start challenging authority when I feel like I'm either being mistreated or there's things that I see that are hypocritical. Hypocrisy is probably the one thing that drives me crazy when I'm held to a standard that other people aren't. And the great thing about being an entrepreneur is you don't have necessarily a boss. Now, it's not like you're independent. You still work for your customers, right? So you still are answering to people. At no time in any type of money-making endeavor are you just an individual. That being said, you do, I think, have a little bit more freedom as an entrepreneur.
I was watching your interview and you were talking about how you were pacing outside your house before you even uploaded it, right? And, I thought of this and it's the most basic question I don't think anyone's ever said, but I understand why you did it. But were you ever like, I'm going to film this out of the uniform? Did it have to be in uniform? And I mean, because I look at it and I'm like, the uniform speaks volumes. It's 1,000 words within that small clip. Did you ever think to yourself, I want to say this, but not in uniform, or was that even a thought in your head, or moving forward?
That's a good question. Absolutely, it was something I thought about. So again, you've obviously gone back and watched all these interviews, so this is a fun interview because these are kind of different questions.
Mm-hmm.
As I didn't know I was going to make that video before that day.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the attack happened. It was after lunch when the attack happened. I can't remember the exact time. Let's call it like 1 or 2 o'clock, or at least that's when the information made it to me. And so really from like 1 to 2 o'clock to like 6:30 p.m. is when I filmed it. That's those 4 hours where I made the decision to make it. And I wrote some things on my computer of what I wanted to say. And I was like, how do I want to do this? And I thought, do I want to do it in my office? Was my first question. Do I want to do it in my uniform? Do I want to identify my billet? Or do I want to, get in civilian clothes and go home and do it? Or do I do it at all? Right. So all these questions are going through my mind.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if I was going to do it, the purpose of it was to have an open conversation about what I thought needed to be addressed. I assessed that the senior leaders wouldn't be held accountable. And we were just at an inflection point in terms of our military, because I felt like we had already gone down the road towards China, and we need to do that. That being said, I didn't feel like we were addressing the failures of the previous one, and I was worried we were going to repeat the same mistakes. And quite honestly, 5 years down the road in some professional journal, some article addressing exactly what I'm addressing now wasn't going to be enough.
Yeah.
So because of all that, so it's like, what do you want to get out of this? I wanted to get out a reaction and a conversation. And if that's what I wanted, then you can't half step it. You've got to go all the way. And so ultimately I decided, hey, I need to use my uniform in my office, knowing that I'll probably be fired over it, but it's important enough for the greater system that I address it in the manner that I did.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. And the thing I was going to go into is some people, obviously, when you put something out there, people have the right to come back and kind of fire and test you as well. You being in the position of commanding Marines and things like that, obviously you have powers of non-judicial punishment, things like that. And people are like, well, how can this guy sit here and say there's hypocrisy, but also you were probably NJPing people for less infractions. And I'm like, but at the same point, I'm not going to defend, but I'm also like, you were saying I will take accountability for these, whatever that reaction is, where I do see the disparity amongst maybe a junior person would be like, yeah, I was underage drinking, but that was dumb. Everyone does that. You know what I mean? And not wanting to take that accountability. So do you have any response to people saying that that's a little hypocritical, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, I honestly, I don't see that being hypocritical, because I said I would take accountability for breaking the rules the whole time. So everyone makes mistakes, and my whole platform has been, you guys made mistakes. You can't take back your mistakes. All I'm asking for you to do is take accountability. So I'm not asking anyone to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So there's leaders all over the place that make mistakes. All we need is them to be held accountable. So a leader that makes a mistake and is held accountable, I don't think is hypocritical.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's part of being a human being. So nobody's perfect. Obviously, this wasn't a mistake, unintentional. Like, this was something I thought through.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why I pled guilty at special court martial. I had the ability to fight it and go to general. And quite honestly, I think I probably could have beat it. But again, the message being the most important thing. And the question you're asking me is because there's a lot of people of like, this guy is a hypocrite. I think I would have added validity to that argument had I tried to beat it through legal loopholes.
Yeah.
So I knew I broke the rules. If I'm asking for accountability, I also have to be held accountable, and I was.
So that kind of goes into this other thing. We've seen Marine times, Navy times, everything of CO is fired, right? And it feels like it's like every week this is going through, and we can say that's the accountability. And, I look at it and I'm like, we're people, right? And so do you feel like the military is maybe oversensitive to knee-jerk reactions and being like, just get rid of you. And maybe you make it through your 05, 06 tours commanding and doing leadership things. And hopefully you make it to that star level and then you're kind of safe. Is that what you think? Or?
Yeah, I think what everybody just wants is consistency. Like we want to make sure everybody's held to the same standard. And I think it's pretty clear that just doesn't work that way. And you brought up like the safe zone being 1-star general. Quite honestly, to me, the biggest, like the enlisted in officers that have the most at risk, at least in our current 20-year retirement system. Now that's changing. So this dynamic is going to change here within the next decade. But currently, people with 11 to 17 years have the most at risk.
Correct.
Because they don't have that retirement and they've been in long enough, they've been invested enough that it's not that easy to walk away. I used to get so mad at commanding officers when I went to EWS as a captain. Our colonel stood in front of us and it was like, if you're not happy, then get out. And it was like, he made it seem like it was just a binary choice. And it's like, all right, I got it. Like, I'm not happy every day. This is fulfilling, but it's a lot more fucking complicated. Sorry. It's a lot more complicated than I'm happy or I'm not happy.
Yeah.
Right. And so, you know, I've got a family, I've got kids. So yes, I think the 11 to 17 year service member has a lot to risk. And so they kind of have this chokehold on them. And right there at the end, I think the 05 commanders get relieved very quickly. I even brought that up in the video, an 05 commander. I mean, it's very simple to relieve them over a lack of trust and confidence. And that's why they fired me without any investigation. You're just fired.
Yeah.
Whereas a general officer can literally lose a war and you do investigations for drone strikes for killing women and children. And I mean, nothing. I mean, Afghanistan, there is no better example. I mean, I could go through the laundry list, but I don't know if it's going to just take people time to like really reflect on it and then be like, yeah, this was a failure. But like, to me, like I saw it immediately. Like you guys, like you have to see this.
Yeah. And I was going to say in one of your interviews, I think you did a very good educational piece because it was, who do you hold accountable? Because that's what you're talking about all the time. And you're like, well, do you hold General Milley accountable, General McKenzie, and you educated them on the operational chain of command that it goes like he is the CENTCOM commander. And not many people understand that's how things are delegated into the Marine Corps operational sphere. And they're thinking it goes through like a million different chains from the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of the Navy, and all the way through. And I'm like, actually, it's much quicker. And that is why the Marines are able to pivot so easily or on command, if you will.
Yeah, they combatant command, most people don't understand it. I mean, quite honestly, they just made it. The Goldwater-Nichols Act in the 80s is what created the combatant commands and the joint commands. So it's relatively new. So people that served in like Vietnam, they didn't even have it, right? And so unless you're a military professional of modern times, most people don't understand. And all they think of is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs is like the senior military advisor. Well, he advises on the services for training, meaning, and equipping. But when you're downrange, those combatant commanders work directly for the Secretary of Defense. Now, I'm sure Milley's got a voice and, you know, there's some advising and some dotted lines on the task force chart. But at the end of the day, General McKenzie is 100% responsible for the CENTCOM Combatant Command, and he works directly for the Secretary of Defense. And he was there from Trump to Biden. Like, he's the guy.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people that have said that if you weren't an 05 lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps, that you would not have had the same effect, which I agree with. And there's criticism towards that, but I'm also like, that also was a leverage point for you. It was something you were like, I'm not just a complaining E3 Lance Corporal that says, I hate doing field day, right? Like you actually were thinking out things. What do you think of those criticisms as, they say some people think that you actually have a better deal than maybe someone that was a junior rank. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a very hard comparison to compare it to an E3 because a lot of what I was saying came from 17 years of experience in education, right? So if we're going to do the officer to enlisted comparison, it almost needs to be a master sergeant or master guns, a first sergeant or sergeant major. Because I mean, it wouldn't be the same if I was a first lieutenant either, right? If I was a first lieutenant, people would be like, all right, first lieutenant, I got it. You've done the one deployment. So if the question is, would it be the same if it was a master sergeant or like a sergeant major? I don't know.
It's a
don't
good
know. I
question,
think
though.
it is. It really is. I think I would like to believe that a first sergeant major that's got a couple thousand followers on the platforms like I did before this, that spoke intelligent. Like, I think Sergeant Major Black is like one of the most articulate, intelligent people that I've seen in a long time. So like, there's a great example of someone who could absolutely talk above people or come to their level and is very smart. And so like, if you had someone like that could articulate the problem, I would like to believe that it would have just as much of an effect. And quite honestly, if you go back and look at my criticisms, all my criticisms have been towards senior officers. And I haven't talked about it, but I quite honestly have been wondering where the senior enlisted have been as well. It wasn't another argument that I wanted to make, but if the senior enlisted is there to speak out on behalf of the junior enlisted, I felt like I had to speak a lot towards what the enlisted were doing, which really there should be some senior enlisted advocating for it as well.
Yeah.
And so that might be a whole nother conversation, but
well, I would say like you also knew I had to deliver this message, and you can't do this message and this message. Like, it becomes a little bit too convoluted. And you released your video in August of last year, and during that time, COVID kicked off a little bit before that. Captain Crozier was a big deal on the Theodore Roosevelt as he commanded that. He sent off that message. People were kind of relating you two as these like embodiments of leadership and kind of spreading a good message, and kind of owning the situation. What do you think? Do you think that you are in a tougher spot than Captain Crozier? What are your thoughts on reflecting and comparing between your situations and kind of where the rubber meets the road?
I've obviously had conversations with my peers about Captain Crozier. That was a big deal. We were all talking about it. I'm very pro Captain Crozier. I think what he did was the right thing. But Captain Crozier was an 06, and the reason you haven't heard anything from him is because he went and got his retirement, and he doesn't want to ruffle feathers because he's still beholden to that retirement. So the difference between me and him is I was willing to give up my retirement, and now I have no chains holding me back. Whereas, I mean, where is he, right?
You're correct. I can't find a single thing about him anywhere.
Because
it's gone.
When those retired generals all signed the letter challenging the Afghan withdrawal, and it was like in the headlines for like a week, the Navy came back and said, hey, we're still paying you all retirement. You want to keep talking shit, and we're going to take your retirement. And so then they immediately back off. So all of these retired 06s and up, that retirement is like their life.
Yeah.
And so, the difference between all of that and someone that just gets forced out before the retirement, like I have nothing to lose at this point, and I can be completely honest, like you're not going to hear from any of those guys again.
Yeah, no. And I've noticed that. That's, as someone that likes to do follow-up stories, I'm like, where can I, peel into this and see kind of the aftermath? Because you get that week of headlines and you get nothing after that. And you're like, what happened? Is that the news cycle? We just, and it's done. So my other question here is, you were relieved. And so my question is, because as you go up to the top, you're an 05, a lot of your peers, generals, colonels, a lot of these people. How, I guess, formal was your, like, you being relieved? Was it like, hey, Stu, what's got to happen? Was it like that? Or was it very like set in stone, would you say?
Well, so I made that video on a Thursday night. I posted it Thursday night. When I came in Friday morning, boss was like, you need to go home. There'll be an investigation. And then he actually called me back in. So I don't know what changed his perspective. I'm assuming the generals called him and said, Stu's got to go. So he ended up firing me that Friday. And I hadn't really talked to anyone other than him or my XO. And all he did was hand me a one sheet and said, we lost trust and confidence. Sign here. Thanks for playing.
And that was it. Wow.
That was it. Not many words were spoken.
So the other question I have here is, you obviously took a political or ideological stance, and many complain about politics being involved with the military. We usually see this as, I say, quotation, shit rolls downhill to units, etc. But it's weird because many officers in country were being pushed into the pseudo-political role on the ground, working with local population, etc., to make peace. Do you think this is such a fine balance that you've had to experience as a Marine Corps officer, where you're in country and you're kind of like trying to maintain hearts and minds, but then you come back and it's like, be quiet, you don't have any sphere of influence or ability to talk about it back in garrison, if that makes sense, and not dealing with that specific mission.
So I don't think what I did was political at all.
Mhm.
So everything I've done, in my opinion, is apolitical. You look at my posts. I mean, I attacked the last 4 presidents, all parties. In fact, I never once used Joe Biden's name, not in any of my posts. The closest thing I came to it was I have a growing discontent and contempt for my senior military and political leadership.
Correct.
That is the closest I came. But every headline in the news was Lieutenant Colonel Scheller and Joe Biden's disastrous withdrawal. I never once even said president. I didn't even use the title because of the respect that I have for the president's office and that civilian control over the military.
Yes.
I never used the word Republican. I never used the word Democrat. In fact, the one time I did use it in a post, I was saying how they were dividing the country. And so but because I was on a gag order and all my supporters were Republican, the narrative, I couldn't counter the narrative of how this was like a right-wing, ultra-conservative thing. And if you go to my website now, AuthenticAmericans.com, like you can see my political views. They're very central. I believe that the polar right and polar left are actually dividing this country. And I think we need to unite. And I think the center left and center right have more in common. And the problem is they get lumped into these extremes on both sides. And so I think, to your question though, when people talk, like the term that's used a lot is woke generals. And I don't think that term is helpful, because it's like, well, what does that mean to you? And I could offer you what my opinion is on that, but it's going to be different than what your opinion is on that. And it's just this vogue term that people use. And I think what they're trying to explain is that generals, my whole problem with the system is that our ideal for climbing the ladder isn't necessarily winning wars or being an effective warfighter. It's how you navigate your career. And so how you navigate your career isn't necessarily synonymous with I'm effective at winning wars. And so when people say woke generals, what they're saying is when you become a 1-star, to get to 4-star, you have to navigate your career by maybe replicating what the political party at the time thinks is important for a general officer to have. And those ideals may not necessarily be in line with winning wars.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I always tell people that, because it's very interesting that you say that we're not worried about what is making the greatest warfighter. The thing is, I always ask, like, if you were to bring a person to your left and right that was ready to deploy today, are they the people that are getting promoted? And a lot of times people say no. And, you know, that is something I pride myself on, my technical skills. I'm an independent duty corpsman. I see patients every day and I take pride in that. And I'm like, and people are like, well, you're not doing this or this to look better. And I'm like, I need to learn or know how to save people's lives. Literally, that is my job. And so that's why I'm like, this is a glass ball to me. It might be a rubber to you, but this is glass to me. I'm not going to drop this one. And this other stuff to me is rubber. So I can appreciate what you're saying. I do think that resonates across many branches with people, as they're like, we need to focus on this and balance these out. So, yeah.
So that's, I think, so going back to the question of, is it political? I think my problem with the system is just that. How do we figure out how to prevent people from just navigating the system when they may not be the most effective warfighters? My solution to that is, when they fail wars, they have to be held accountable. And so when you start holding these people accountable, it's going to cause people that are climbing the ladder to realize, like, well, shit, I also have to be able to win these other things rather than just navigate it through what's important over here.
Yeah, I could see that. I was going to say, I know that this is a little bit lighthearted in regards to maybe the serious tone we've had. And I've kind of gone through this chronologically because I was looking at everything that you were doing. So you ended up making the second video from a bus. I feel like this bus had more questions than anyone else out there. They're like, Stu, is he a bus converter dweller of some kind? Does this have a bathroom in it, a whole stove? It just really put these vibes that, like, you were in the middle of North Carolina, just in some bus hanging out and no one really understood what was going on. So what is up with this bus?
Yeah, great question. So when I was a captain, I've been in North Carolina, Camp Lejeune, and Quantico my whole career. So I basically just ping pong between those two places. So when I was a captain, I bought 50 acres of timberland as just an investment tool / man's playground where I would go out and ride four-wheelers, shoot guns. And so I put an ISO container out there for lockable storage. So I keep a tractor and a couple four-wheelers out there. So then when I came back in 2019, I actually bought 2 like out of service school buses that were like just capable of driving out to my farm. In fact, when I bought them, I had a buddy help me, and one of them caught on fire as we were driving to my farm. So we almost didn't make it. And so we got them to the farm, and the whole point of it was I lease it actually to a nonprofit called A Hero. You can Google them. So my buddy was a major, and he got out and he started this nonprofit that does outdoor therapy for veterans that are struggling with PTSD. So when we put the buses out there, he brought a team of people that, we gutted them, and we have some beds in them. There's no bathroom, but it's basically if you go out to the farm and you want to go hunting, or you just need some time to get some mentorship, we have a place for you to sit in, because my ISO containers got tractors and four-wheelers, and it's not really conducive. So the bottom line is I have them to help veterans struggling with PTSD. It's an outlet that I partner with a nonprofit to do. But yes, so when I went out there to make the video, people were like, where is he? But I have it for, quality reasons, but just nobody knew the backstory to that.
Okay. Cause it was very strange. It was. And I think that also brought the other question, because I said you're by yourself during that time. And were you by yourself at that point?
I was, yeah.
Okay.
So I got fired on Friday. So I made that first video on Thursday, got fired on Friday. On Saturday, I was just thinking about how to handle the situation. And without going into the whole story, ultimately, I felt like the Marine Corps was kind of turning on me. I had previous bosses calling me out publicly. I had been relieved without investigation. And I just thought, I'm going to get out ahead of this. I think my message is important enough. I'm not going to let them bully me. And so I'm going to resign. And so when I got on that school bus to make it, that was that Sunday. So I haven't even been back to work since before I got relieved, and I didn't edit it. It was like Jay-Z, one take, and then post. And, that's the one video that if I could go back and change some verbiage, like bring the whole system down, kind of got away from the emotional part of the moment. But I don't think people appreciate the weight of that situation. Like, I knew potentially family life was going to fall apart from that. I knew I was going to lose my retirement. I knew I was going to go probably to legal action. Like, I knew with that video, it was like all chips in. And so it was just very stressful. And if you go back and actually watch it, like, the content of it is actually still pretty good. It's just the emotional part there at the end got away.
Well, I was going to say, there's a video where you also mentioned you're speaking to your lawyer. You're like, I know you advised me not to, but I'm still going to talk about how did that go down after you posted your video where you're like, oh, you're not going to like this, but I'm back at it.
That's so funny you say that, because he was mad. So like when I actually got out of jail, because they all thought I was going to post again, and they're like, you will go back to jail. You will go to general. You will be found guilty. These are my lawyers talking to me. They're like, dude, like, just no one had trust that I could have self-discipline and not post again. And I was like, I got it. I understand what you're counseling me on. The lawyers always feel like they're right. And they work for me. I don't work for you. And I just felt like I was battling with them on that the whole time. And so to your question, my lawyer was like, all of my friends have been telling me this, my lawyer, Brian, because I'm like, I want to say sorry to my lawyer, Brian. He's like, if you do post and you go back to jail, he's like, leave my name out of it.
Oh, okay.
But yes, I was offered a deal when I made the third video. The second and third video were just kind of emotional outpourings. I made the third video to kind of take the edge off the second video, but I'm still like trying to normalize violence and letting people know, because we were all going through a hard time then, that it's okay to question people that ask you to kill people and then refuse to take accountability for it. And that maybe some of these counterinsurgency things we've been doing for the last 20 years, like, we could ask a little bit tougher questions about it. And then after I made that third video, like, I was in my head trying to take the edge off the emotion in the second video, but then it almost got portrayed as I was still crazy. You know, this was after I felt like there was PR attacks in the media about my mental health. I was ordered to get a mental health evaluation. Then I had like friends texting me like, dude, that third video makes you look crazy. So then I got offered another legal deal, and I was like, and being crazy is so hard when you, especially when you're having a hard time talking to the media because it comes with legal actions. If you're crazy, anything you say is like, I'm not crazy. And they're like, well, that's what a crazy person would say.
Exactly.
You know,
right.
Like, how do you defend being crazy? Because anything you say is crazy. So it doesn't make sense. And so that's when I was like, you know what? I need to make so no matter what the legal deal is, the narrative will always be that I'm this crazy veteran. And I still believe that my original message was sound. And maybe I'm in a room full of crazy people and I'm the only sane one, or maybe I am the crazy one, but I really believe what I'm saying is correct. So that's when I made that fourth video that tried to prefer charges against General McKenzie. And that's really where the videos ended.
Okay. While you obviously have advocated for your family and your ex-wife in your second video, many people still speculated that you were doing this as a way in spite of her to ensure money would not go towards her if you were to divorce. Any truth to this? Because people were thinking you had alternative motives besides accountability, essentially. What was kind of coming around as far as some of the narrative, I would say is like an off story.
Yeah, so on the school bus video, like there was GoFundMe's popping up all over the place for me. And I was very clear that like, I don't want money. This isn't about money. And I actually put my wife's Venmo out, and that was a disaster because she made probably a couple thousand, and then all those people demanded their money back. And then like Venmo was tracking illegal activity. And so like she actually got no money out of that, and it created a lot more stress to the situation. So I wish again, going back to that second video, I would have done a lot of things differently. So I was trying to be helpful many times through this ordeal. I was trying to do right by her, and I was actually making it much worse. So we did end up finally, after the fourth video, we got the Pipe Hitter Foundation that I partnered with.
Yeah.
And that raised quite a lot of money, a couple $1 million.
Yeah.
But you gotta understand, with that money, it comes with stipulations. So like, I can't go buy a new truck with that money. It's for my family and their relocation and like school expenses. And so the majority of that money, I'm still going through a divorce. The majority of that money went to my wife and to my 3 sons. And I think that's where it should have gone, because they had a retirement and a plan that I took from them through their actions. And so I'm not in a bad place with my soon to be ex-wife. We're very amicable, and I want to take care of her.
Whenever I look at things, I really try and reverse engineer. And I'm like, you seem like a guy that loves your kids. Like, even if that didn't work out, I was like, I very much had that you're a family man kind of mentality of you. And I was like, even if that was in spite of this woman, I'm like, the money would be going to your kids. Like, and you know that. So that's why I'm like, that doesn't make sense. It pokes a hole, or a pretty good hole in this from my perspective, looking at it. That'd be a very short-sighted
we put a good portion of it in trust for each of the kids. And my wife got a substantial amount, and she should, right? She's been relying on me. She's a school teacher. I will probably go on and I will be all right, and I will be able to make money, and she's not going to have the platform that I'll have going forward. And like, I want to take care of people that are with me in my life. Like, I want them to end better than when they started. And she's going to be with me for the rest of my life. She's the mother of my children. So I want to take care of her. And so all those Americans that donated, it was a blessing. And so if you're wondering like where the money went, it went to take care of my family, as it should.
So obviously, was that the only kind of ramifications towards them that you were dealing with? Just the Venmo stuff? Because I mean, it's hard to separate that as people want to drag other aspects of your life. And were there any other major things that you were worried about or concerned with that came from that?
Well, we were getting death threats. Like,
wow.
My wife was getting death threats. I was getting death threats. When I went to jail, my kids, everyone in Jacksonville, North Carolina knew who I was, were making fun of my children for their dad being in jail. Like, my youngest kid left the playground crying. Like, we had to pull them out of school and move them. And so, my family went through a lot, and it was a very tough situation.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I was going to go on to here and say, Marine Corps from the start is run off a peer group system and brotherhood. This is noted from the start of your initial training, which you mentioned with Jocko. Now you mentioned Colonel Hobbs, someone that you look to as a father, and you say that you pretty much were not honorable unless you resigned your commission. Now that you've done that, have any of those relationships like Hobbs, come back together now that you've officially done it, or do you think those are still broken?
The Hobbs one is very complicated. I mean,
Okay.
he called me a couple times through this ordeal, and I never answered it. And he left some voicemails, and even the voicemails further upset me. And then he made a comment in the Wall Street Journal that I was arrogant, and this was all. He said, "I'm 100% sure this is a political ploy," which is just not true. And so I just felt like he continued to attack me.
Mm-hmm.
It was, and so no, there's no building that bridge back for me. And I've never actually gone back and engaged him. Like, I guess I called him out in that second video responding to what he said to me, but what I'll say to him, like, if I could tell him something, it would just be like, brother, I had nothing but love for you. I looked up to you a lot. You hurt me, and I'm just going to try and move forward. I'm not looking back.
Okay. And, obviously you've made some promises throughout your videos. One of those was you didn't want any money from, retirement, VA, any of that stuff. Now that you've been out, obviously one of the first things they do is go make a VA claim. Have you even made a VA claim yet?
No, they pushed me out so fast that I did not file for disability. I haven't done it yet.
Mm-hmm.
I will probably do it. I got a general under honorable, so I think I could still file for my disability, but I haven't yet.
And if people want to backtrack on that, I have to be fair. And I'm like, you've deployed a good amount for this country. I don't, for that, I'm like, disability, I would take it. If you can,
I agree with you.
I
will probably take it. And honestly, I regret doing that because I had some guys from the VA reach out to me and say that they had young enlisted members that heard what I said, and then they were kind of echoing it. Like, I don't want any VA. And so in a way, I set a bad example because I think it's very important when service members go through what they go through to get the benefits that they deserve. And so, these are always like hindsight, going back and looking at my comments and what the ramifications were. And there's always these second and third things that I didn't even think through. And so that's one of them that I wish I didn't have an impact on, people thinking it's cool not to get their VA benefits. And so, like, I just set the record straight. I will go out and get my VA benefits. It's important. I just haven't yet.
It's so weird because you got thrust in the spotlight and then you're trying to understand how this ripples out, because yes, you had influence before, but this is like how many ripples out that you're seeing this. And, sometimes, it's not, just do your homework. It's cool to do your homework, right? It's cool to go get your VA claim. It sounds not cool, but do what you have to do and take care of yourself. So one thing that I wanted to go into is you mentioned generals were going to need that money more than you would. And you said after you're going to bring the whole system down. And I guess a lot of people are wondering, do you have more information? Do you feel like you have longevity to continue forward? Do you feel like you've reserved things, or are you planning this out to kind of speak more in depth on these subjects in the future?
No, I mean, I after that video went back and clarified in a constitutional manner with one loud voice. That was always my plan, even though there was like a lot of painting me as this violent extremist. I don't think I ever came close to that. And so I built a coalition of 20 congressional candidates and 5 Senate candidates. You can find it on votesforvets.org. I plan to help them get elected because I think we need leaders, not politicians, in the 22 election cycle. And my whole point with that was exactly what we were talking about in the beginning. We have these generals that have navigated their career but aren't necessarily the most effective. And it's the centralization of power within the system is broken and it needs to be fundamentally changed. And I still believe that. And that comes from putting leaders in places that can do it. Right now, Congress has just, I think, holistically failed to hold them accountable. Obviously, the executive branch has not held them accountable, and they're not self-policing themselves either. So somebody from the outside needs to be able to come in here and apply pressure, because right now, in the current system, it's not working in the way it was designed.
Yeah. So I was going to say some other stuff you mentioned on some of your posts was you were mentioning about what's saying that we can't have a young commandant on the Marine Corps or something like that, like reversing positions. And, you know, I've looked at the military rank structure, and it's not an offense to like the officer community at all, but is having even a college degree a good baseline measurement to say you should be an officer? Should we somehow shake this up to allow some kind of innovation, right? Or some kind of development or adaptation to culture? Because I mean, I look at it, and if you look at human nature, right? Like back in old times, the oldest guy knew the most stuff and would pass it on to the next oldest guy that after he died, right? But if you continue to do that, you can only expand so much, right? And so it is important to say there might be someone younger that could do this job better. Is there any ideas or thoughts that you have that could make that happen in a military structure?
I think the college degree requirement is outdated. I think the college degree itself is outdated.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this isn't a novel idea. Google's already done this. You don't need a college degree to go work at Google. They have developed their own system to see who's going to perform and do well. The military officer should be the same way. I think that's too revolutionary for them. But I think all Marines should go to the same boot camp. There should be one measuring stick, send them through that, and then you have some type of placement test based on aptitude, capability, leadership to determine who goes into these things.
Yeah.
I mean, just the officer training pipeline. I've worked at OCS. I've obviously gone through OCS. It's 4 drill instructors and a young captain. And those are the people, that's the only time they screen officers. And so like, does a supply staff sergeant, drill instructor, is that the guy that understands inherently the leadership qualities that we want in an officer? Like, I don't know. I'm not saying he doesn't, but I'm saying maybe there's somebody else that's better. I don't know. Yeah. And so just looking at OCS, like who's the people that we're using to screen officer candidates? And really it's just right now, our system is 4 drill instructors that are available and a young captain. And that's it. And that's how we're screening potential. And so take that. I mean, so everyone should do the same boot camp. There should be some type of aptitude test. And then in the screening module, we should probably look harder at who those people are that are screening officers. And then your next question was, is there ways to put more youth into the senior ranks? And I think there absolutely should be. I mean, the example I was using was Alexander the Great. I mean, one of the better leaders taught by Aristotle was leading people through the Alps, like fighter leader. So, and I look at some of my peers that are just brilliant, and I could give you like specific names of people that would go there and do very well. And I just think, just look at the faces of the old men on the walls, the command boards, just like whoever you are, if you're in the military, just go look at those faces. It's like all like deep circles, like worn down faces. Like you can just see it on their faces that they're wore out. They don't have probably the charisma or the life. And that leads to thinking too. Like you get ingrained into your thinking because you're old and worn down. And sometimes I think the system would benefit from some young, fresh idea leadership.
It's funny you said, because in the sphere of business, we have how many young entrepreneurs?
Right. Elon Musk, like,
all these
we
guys.
Can't have an Elon Musk be a commandant, right? Because our system prevents that. And so 100%.
So going back to your interview with Tucker Carlson, you were mentioning there were some things that you regretted in your statements that you were saying that were distractions, right? And you saw my videos. I went into the chess pieces. I went into everything that I could to try and understand what you were saying. Do you have any specific examples that you think were distractions per se?
Yeah, I mean, bring the whole effing system down was like the one I wish I could wash away. There's one in my third video where like you can see me processing, and it was just like I was talking about my experiences, and I at one point said I have the ability to inflict violence, which is true. I do. I've been used as a weapon to inflict violence, but like that little statement was just like ripped out, and it was like, look, he's violent. He's a violent extremist, right? And it just allows people to get off track on what you're actually saying.
Yeah.
So those two bring the system down, and I have the ability to inflict violence. Like if I could go back, I would wash those away. But the majority of it, I would keep the same.
Now, during your videos, did you script those ever, or were you very off the cuff with them? So
like if you look at the school bus video, I had a green notebook where I took like, and actually I left it there because I was just so stressed out when I posted it.
Mhm.
And I just like a month ago went back. In fact, it might even be sitting in I just went back and got it and looked back at my notes, and it's like 4 sentences, right? Like, so like
Yeah.
4 key topics. It was like, talk about wife's Venmo, talk about you're going to resign, talk about Colonel Hobbs talking about you're not honorable. So yeah, I had probably like wave tops, but then, I talked for 10 minutes.
Mhm.
And so you try and hit those key points, but it's just very lucid.
Yeah.
And so that's how all my videos, I'd say the most scripted one was the first one,
Okay.
because I was sitting in my office for 3 hours and I was like typing what I wanted to say. But even then, I think the first video I took probably 3 takes, right? So I took a couple takes on the first video, but like the second and third video was like 1 take. And then I think the 4th video was probably more scripted as well, where I was talking about preferring charges against General McKenzie. So I guess a combination would be the answer to that question.
Okay. Awesome. And so going into that, what is your love with chess? Because you obviously showed the picture of chess. We talked about the chess moves. You haven't posted any more chess moves since then. So I have a coworker.
That's not true. So I saw what you said when you went through my post and you said that there was no chess moves. I did hide a chess move in there and you just missed it. So no big deal. I'll just throw that back at you.
Okay.
And then on my George Washington post on December 23rd, when I got out, I did end with a chess move as well.
Okay.
And
I'll have to go back and check some of that then.
Yeah. So you caught all of them but one.
Okay.
And I intentionally was real discreet about the one.
So I have to ask, have you ever been to Japan?
I have. I did.
Have you been to Coco's Curry?
I haven't.
Okay. So it's a little curry spot. I'm telling you, me and my coworker, we took a little chessboard about this size to Coco's Curry. And these Japanese ladies are like, why are they playing chess in the restaurant? And we're going through every post and we're breaking down what type of strategy this is. So everyone's like, you need to ask him about this. There's a lot of nuance with your case that I think you are just sitting back like, man, this is pretty funny seeing people, ponder on everything from the bus to the chess moves to the words that you use, right?
Yeah. So your question, like, what's up with chess? First of all, I love chess.
Mm-hmm.
So I play it all the time. On chess.com, I usually play a 10-minute game and my rating is about 1750, right? So if anyone that's familiar with chess, like that's about my level. So I think like a grandmaster is at like 2200, right? So
from what I know, you're pretty solid if you're at 17, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, I think at like, in my opinion, around 1500, you start getting good.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can hold your own against most mortals, right?
Yeah.
So
not computers.
There's like this misnomer of chess where it's just some kid that gets down and he just sees the board. Like that's all bullshit. Chess is like anything else. It's reps and sets. It's pattern recognition, reps and sets. And so I just get on chess.com and I'm just like constantly playing it. And then when I lose based on some type of trap that somebody set, like you sit there and you just study that and you just reps and sets. And so again, chess was never something that was just natural to me. It's just come through repetition and it's a game that I like to play. And
I don't know if you saw my correlation from it, but I saw, because I was like looking this up and I was like, the Marines have actually tried to implement chess in their training and strategy. Has that been
that was a coincidence? The implementation of the training pipeline, but it's funny you say that because like I saw that too and I was going through it, but there wasn't a deeper meaning on the Marines implementing it, but there was like the opening gambit. So I'm always queen out. Mm-hmm. And you can argue king out, queen out, but I think queen out is more aggressive, and that's my style. And so that's the game I play usually on chess, and that's also the technique that I was obviously using through this ordeal. Yeah. And so yes, there was some thought in terms of the moves and how we were doing it in the symbolism of the thing that was playing out.
So I have to ask now: are we going to get more chess moves?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, we will keep in tune with this. I promise you. So going back into some more hard hitting stuff here. You criticize the military industrial complex being an issue. What sorts of military technologies, et cetera, do you think are the way we can fix this? You cite generals, et cetera, that are hired by military contracting companies, but do you think the ethical guidance is enough to keep their divide from those companies?
Yeah. So the problem is once they get out of the military, you lose control over them. Right?
Exactly. Right.
But the exception is fucking Lloyd Austin got out from the CENTCOM combatant commander, went on the Raytheon board, and now he's the Secretary of Defense. So short of the Secretary of Defense, that's maybe like the one time where you can be like, no, dude, you were just a board member on something. We're not going to select you for the SecDef.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with the Secretary of the Navy. He owns his own contracting company that does hundreds of millions of dollars with the DoD. So like both the SecNav and the SecDef currently came off of these big contracting things. And so how do you fix it? I'm not sure. That's a complicated one. I would say this first answer is don't allow the Secretary of the Navy and the Secretary of Defense to have obvious ethical concerns with their previous board director jobs. Number two is you just got to be careful, I think, with how you, as the government, accept contracts. So if there's a company that you're accepting contracts with and it's filled with retired generals, somebody probably needs to take a look at that and say, are we accepting the contract because it's the best company or because these retired generals have the relationships with people that they're accepting the contract with, right?
Yeah.
So, and it can just leads to inefficiencies and nepotism, incest. It's not good. That's why we have monopoly laws, because it drives away competition.
And I was going to say, this alone, I think we could talk for an hour about just like government spending and things like that right. We've dealt with. Obviously, when you're in the system, you see like this item, you're like, why does this cost so much? And then it's like, well, we got this contract, we had to compare these three and they had to do this. You're like, okay, I now get it, but it's like we're jumping through a million hoops when I could go to the store and buy this pack of pens for cheaper, Here's
a fun fact. In that first video, if you look on my gear tree, there's like a high cut helmet.
Mm-hmm.
So I had also another Kevlar. So in all my debacle, I lost that high cut helmet. So the gear turn in, every Marine's always missing some type of gear. Like that's what I was missing. They charged me like $800 for that effing helmet. And it was like, you know what I mean? Like, why is it that much money?
Yeah. I mean, it's about $5,000 right back here, right. That I got to go turn back in. So, I think we've already covered this question, but you mentioned in your statements, we can't all be wrong. And do you feel like when you say we, you're talking about the centralization of people that majority probably fall more central than media would like us to believe?
Well, I think those are two separate things. When I say we can't all be wrong, I believe that most of us have a common sense perspective, and we all so let's use a specific example. The Afghanistan withdrawal, I think most of us believe that was handled improperly, could have been done better. Like there's not a lot of people that would argue that. But that's separate issue from the centralization of power. And I think the centralization of power, specifically in the military, has just created a lot of problems. And so, and I think most of us can look at it and agree that there's significant problems in the two-tiered system of accountability.
Mm-hmm. Going even more spicy, because I thought this was interesting because you specifically addressed the Commandant of the Marine Corps, and I was like, whoa, okay. And you knew at this point, when you say something, it's seen, right? Like at that point. So you mentioned knowing the Commandant of the Marine Corps wanted to court-martial you. Did you ever clarify this, or was this speculation? Because I think you've mentioned kind of in passing that, but not specifically this.
This is a great question, and I'm glad I get the opportunity to say it.
Mm-hmm.
He stood in front of the EWS class, and somebody asked him a question vaguely enough that everyone knew he was talking about me. It was about social media and pushing back, and it was like right when I was going through all my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone in the class knew the question was about me. And then he came back and said, you can't attack the president of the United States without going to court-martial.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, I never attacked the president of the United States. But there was a bunch of fake social media accounts under my name at that point that were attacking the president of the United States. So I think he just saw that and just assumed.
Mm-hmm.
And so as soon as he gets out of there, I've got like 3 captains calling me being like, the Commandant was just talking about you. Yeah. And so imagine me now, I'm in my hotel room and I've got all these captains telling me that he's going to court-martial me. And he was like incorrectly quoting me. And essentially that's, in my opinion, undue command influence, talking about how I was attacking the president. And so, yeah, I made a post. I was like, I heard you want to court-martial me. Everyone told me. And then I pointed out something that bothers me, which is he just recently revoked battalion commanders' authority to manage their own unit's social media. And we talk about maneuver warfare, decentralization, and trust and confidence. Like if he can't trust me as an 05 to manage my unit's social media, like we were talking about the problem of centralization of power, like that's a perfect example of a centralization of power.
Was
and
there
so,
any,
and then
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
So then in my investigation, they took that post about the commandant and they actually edited out, because it was like just 3 paragraphs of like 3 sentences each, where I was like, I heard you were looking for me. You want to court-martial me. Everyone told me. And then the third one was like, I'm moving faster than you, like maneuver warfare. Where have we seen this? Something like that. And so that first and third paragraph took out and stuck in my investigation. They didn't include the second paragraph, which talked about, why are you taking the responsibility from the battalion commanders away to manage your own unit social? Because it was like a really valid point. And so the investigating officer is like, well, these 2 paragraphs are damning. This paragraph makes too much sense, so I'm going to delete it. And we're just going to add the first and third paragraph. And I was like, how is that fair in an investigation? Because you're now watering down like the message that I was giving him just to make me look guilty.
Yeah. I mean, and then it creates a new perception, you know.
That's right.
We've seen it so many times in judicial process, though, where that stuff happens. And it's like, we only have so much time to, you know, show every bit of evidence and what's actually relevant and admissible and all that stuff. So, now, as far as that goes, you made that video while you were in your uniform. Was it the 3rd video where you're in your tan top? I think it was.
Fourth one.
4th video.
Yeah.
You mentioned in there, obviously, Brian, shout out to Brian. I know he wants to be in this. So, but I want to say, you mentioned that they offered you a plea deal of NJP and all that, and that might have ruined your chances. Did that ruin that plea deal by you posting that video?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Not only did it ruin it, so they immediately, because I did go back after that video and was like, I'll take the deal. They're like, no way, dude. Dang. They then waited like an entire another week. They gave me a gag order after that 4th video too. So they gave me the gag order. They rejected my like acceptance of the deal. And then they didn't offer me another deal for like another 8 days. And that's when I went and made that final post that got me into jail. So it was like, not only did they deny it, but they're like, we're not going to offer you another one. We're just going to sit and wait for you to do something that's going to get you into more trouble.
Yeah. So. To maybe garner more ammunition, right?
That's right. That's right.
So, what do you feel about your charges and punishment? Like, do you feel like it was appropriate? Are you like, meh, you know, it is what it is? Or did you think things would go better or worse? I guess from when you first did the first video to where you are now, did you think it would be worse than it is or better than it is?
I thought I would get an honorable discharge. So that one was surprising to me. But I knew I broke the rules. And so people like really go through those. You did this on one of your videos. You went through all the findings of facts or statements of fact. Nobody read that. And a fun story on that one, because you were quoting it so much. They actually waited till the day before my trial to send us that. And when they sent it to us, there was a bunch of stuff in there about child pornography. And I was like, what are you talking about? The prosecutors had copied and pasted an old charge sheet of videos where I guess somebody else had like child, and then sent it to me. And so like the day before where I'm supposed to review this, it has somebody else's charge sheet. And that's like how incompetent this process is. And so my defense attorneys then had to like rewrite it, push it back to them, have them endorse it, send it back to us. And so why I'm saying all this, like all of that details was irrelevant.
Yeah.
There was only one choice. Do you plead guilty to all of this? At some point, we're going to, and I didn't even see that when I was in jail, right? They didn't write it until the day before my trial. The question was only this: do you plead guilty to whatever? And I was like, well, what is whatever? It's like, it doesn't matter. There's a bunch of charges here. Like, if you think you're not guilty, then let's go to general and fight it all, or just say you're guilty, get out, and then you take honorable or general under honorable. And so that's really what it came down to.
Because you mentioned the gag order specifically, and that was interesting to me because as somebody that talks online, that does military content, talks about this stuff, you know, there is a level of freedom of speech. And I'm not sure it was the gag order a legal order? Is that allowed specifically? Did you ever talk with your lawyers about that?
I think them telling me not to post or discuss anything that would bring discredit to the Marine Corps is legal. My opinion is anything beyond that is illegal. And I would have loved to challenge that legally, but I didn't have the bandwidth of the time.
Okay.
But I mean, I couldn't, like, literally no one could say that I said anything that is completely unrelated to the military. That's how strict this gag order was, which in my opinion is not legal, but that would have to be challenged. You know, the government had their side.
So I already know this answer, but people obviously still want to go to it. And if this is the first time they're watching this or, you know, covering anything with you, I'm surprised. But what I wanted to ask is, many have asked you about going into politics. You have declined this. You have now created your website, which is looking for influence and change in the system. What ways are you doing that exactly?
Yeah, so my website, AuthenticAmericans.com. You can check it out. It's my views. You can support me through that website. I've also got votesforvets.org. That's the number 4. So Votes for Vets. And that's where I've pulled together a bunch of congressional and Senate candidates that I'd like to support in the 22 election cycle. And so through those 2 platforms, that's what I'm doing right now. I'll probably write a book, and then, you know, I may run for politics in 24. I haven't made any decisions, but I'm not going to be doing it at least in the next couple of years.
Okay. Now there is a kind of hard-hitting question, because I went back and we still haven't really covered this, because as you talked about the previous 4 presidents, you were kind of like, you're full cannons blasting everybody. And one of those that I think most people were surprised about, obviously, was former President Trump. Okay, I understand that. That's pretty clear cut to talk about. But the General Mattis stuff that you kind of went into, what was your thought process putting it out there? Because I think a lot of people were like, because he has such a following, you know what I mean? And he's definitely been like a figure within the Marine Corps, kind of like I guess you could say a modern day Chesty, right? People wanted to put him up on this pedestal and be like, Mad Dog Mattis. So what made you kind of include him in this?
Well, first of all, that post where I attacked like all those people you just described and more was designed to get a reaction from the government. So it was disguised as emotional, but I knew that the generals were testifying to the House and the Senate on a Tuesday, Wednesday, respectively, the next week. And so I posted that on a Saturday, saying I'd be ready to go to jail on Monday, anticipating that if they did overreact, because they didn't have the legal right to send me to jail. I had gone through the manuals. So they basically lied and said I was a flight risk to get me into jail. But I knew that if they did something like that, it would bring attention to the general officers that were talking to the House and the Senate. So you got to understand the context of it. So this was a calculated move to see what they would do based on the legality of the gag order and knowing that the generals were going to have to go testify. So now understand that when you get into the weeds of like each individual on the micro level, yes, General Mattis, I think to your point, has been lionized, and I don't buy in all the hype. Now, I know that he is truly a very smart person, and I know he truly cares about the Marines. Like I know I have inside stories of things that he's done, like generally a good person.
Yeah.
But this guy didn't get combat experience until he was in 06, right? And so the facade of him being this like warfighter, he doesn't have the same experiences as my generation with a gun in the dirt. Everything he's done has been at the high level, and he has built his reputation on the Small Wars Journal and counterinsurgency. And I just fundamentally disagree with it. I think the way you fight an insurgency is to not get involved in an insurgency. And in the moments that you have to get involved in an insurgency, I still think there's many more effective ways that we could have done it. I mean, General Mattis was one of the CENTCOM combatant commanders. And guess what? Like, we didn't win either of our wars. General Mattis resigned as President Trump's Secretary of Defense because of a disagreement on ISIS. ISIS materialized because of the Iraq war that he failed, which is what made him popular. And we just don't, for whatever reason in the Marine Corps, we don't question him because he's had this propaganda machine. And so he's a great dude, very smart, loves the Marines, and deserves my respect. but I don't think he's all these other things that people try to accredit to him. And so when I attacked him, it was kind of trying to pull the sheet, like, let's go. Because I say, let's go back and check the record. Like, how many wars did you win?
Okay. I was just curious because it seemed kind of left to me, off-putting, kind of on the side angle thing. The president thing I kind of understood, but so obviously you were in the brig during the time of everyone testifying, right? You did not
Hold on. There's a good story to that because we were just talking about Mattis.
Oh, let's go.
When I went into jail and they do the strip search and everything, on the wall was a big poster of General Mattis. Like, he was looking at me.
Yeah.
As I got into jail.
Small world, right? You're like, the guy just made a post about I'm now looking at. But I was going to go back into it. So now you mentioned going to the brig, right? Now you said that when you went, I was asking pretty much like, at that time, we were going to see them testify in front of Congress. You didn't get to see that until after you were released, correct? I think it's 5 hours of footage.
You get 1 hour of TV time a day. And so in my 1 hour of TV, I asked them to turn on Fox News, and I actually heard them talking about me in my 1 hour of TV time, which was pretty interesting, being in jail and hearing them talk about you being in jail. So I did get a little bit.
Okay. I just wasn't sure how much access you had.
Not much.
Now, you obviously talk about your treatment. You were not on a flight risk, in your opinion, compared to what the Marine Corps is saying. Was there any other treatment issues that you had while you were there that you were supposed to get?
I didn't. You're supposed to get an inventory list of stuff. And my XO is the same rank as me. We're both lieutenant colonels. I was like, hey, bro, I'm supposed to have an inventory list. And he's like, well, they told me that they're going to give it to you when you get in there. I got in there, they didn't give it to me. So I didn't have socks or underwear or t-shirts or just basic items for 5 days. And so there's formal complaints you can make as a prisoner in jail. I had to fill out a formal complaint, and essentially by that Friday, 5 days in, I was able to get all my stuff because I complained. But yeah, I didn't have the inventory list, which I thought was.
Do you feel like that was on purpose, or do you think it was a mistake?
I quite honestly think it was incompetence.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just how many times can people be incompetent before I start connecting dots? I do think it was incompetent, but I don't know for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And it just was what it was.
Okay. I just wasn't sure if you thought it was a malicious intent type of thing, or,
I don't think it was.
It's such a low level versus, stuff coming
down.
But
when you going back to the charge being my charge sheet, again, I don't think that was they're just incompetent.
Yeah.
How many times do you have to keep illustrating incompetence before it's get your shit together?
So speaking on that too, because I was curious, obviously you had the same lawyer as Eddie Gallagher, and you guys have talked and shared experiences. How was his brig treatment versus yours? Were they similar, different, or, did he have the same kind of treatment issues as you?
Eddie had a much rawer deal than me. I mean, the things that they did to Eddie are just beyond imagination. So I got a pretty bad deal, but go read his book. It's crazy what they did to him. So he definitely had a worse end of it. And he spent a lot longer in jail. I think he spent 6 weeks to 2 months in jail.
Yeah.
Even when he got out, they put him in a barracks room under restriction and escorted in places. So, and they raided his house. They wiretapping. It was crazy. Some of the stuff they did to him.
Let's get into some viewer questions. You saw that I pinged off all my social medias to see what people are going to say. I've got 10 questions here. I know we've already asked 20, but we're asking for 10 more if you got a minute. So Jay Coates says, thoughts on the vaccine? Obviously you were in command during that. Do you have any thoughts on that being rolled out?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of people have asked me that because it's become this poster child for, I don't know. So my thing on the vaccine is the military absolutely legally discriminates. And obviously we all take vaccines when we come in. The DOD's position is that they gave a legal order to take it. What I'll say is the government should acknowledge the unique situation of this vaccine, right? It's obviously unique. It went through the FDA much faster. The government has given people many reasons to not trust them. I'm not kidding. The anthrax shot, it was 6 and a booster.
Yep.
I took 5. They lost my medical record, made me do another 5. And then they found my medical record, like, oh my God, you've had like 10 of these. And then they came out and said, no, wait, it's bad for you. Like it causes nerve damage. So like, you know, I'm a little bit older, and so I've seen some of this.
Yeah.
And what the COVID vaccine, whatever your belief is, whether you get it or you think you shouldn't get it, if you think you shouldn't get it, the only way you can challenge it legally is to show that it didn't legally go through the FDA, like it was rushed. And so if that was the case, then the DoD doesn't have the legal right to tell you to take it. So that's your legal maneuver, but that would have to play out in the courts. And so ultimately, as it stands right now, until you can defeat that legally, the DoD has given a legal order. And so my position would be, if they've given a legal order, you have a choice. You either get out or you stay in. But if you get out, here's where I get upset about it. A service member who came in, and this wasn't a requirement, and understanding the unique situation, should absolutely get an honorable, like a guy that served for 15 years should get an honorable discharge. There's no questions about that. For the military right now to give people anything less than honorable if they decide not to get the vaccine, to me is criminal.
Okay. Interesting take on it. I was just curious because obviously you were still kind of in that era, you know, as you were coming out of it. So Baldy Chavez says, why do you think careerists are entitled or feel they shouldn't be held accountable? What is their motive? Just self-preservation or?
Well, I don't think everyone, I mean, that's the question inherently generalizes. I don't think everyone thinks like that, but they're absolutely, I mean, look at the actions that I went through. There is a systemic problem of a two-tiered system of accountability. I think we all just need to find our voice and figure out ways to apply pressure to make sure that we hold those people accountable. Why do people do it? I mean, I can't answer that. I don't know. You'd have to ask them.
Okay. Noah Sykes says, what is the most important thing you have taken away from this?
Oh, that's a tough question. The most important thing I've taken away. I guess I knew how strong I was, and this really put that to the test. And I never let anything break me. Like I stayed convicted in what I believed in, even if it meant standing alone and having the entire world call me crazy. I believed it. And I quite honestly think now that I have the chance to be, you know, speak freely, that there's a lot of people coming to my side. You'd be amazed at how many people after that Jocko podcast actually messaged me and was like, hey man, I didn't agree with you at first, but I changed my mind. Right. And so like those messages mean a lot to me. And so this was very challenging. The thing I took away is it's tough to defeat me when I'm convicted in my values.
Yeah. And it's tough too, when you have the attention span that's so small, where you have a 5, 10, whatever minute video, when you can spend 3 hours or this time with you and really sit down. And I'm like, I agree with you way more than I thought I would, and be like, hey, we're actually more on the same page than we are different on a lot of this stuff. Right. But I will tell you this, I had more than enough people, anytime you posted, anytime they're like, you got to make a video. They just knew it was coming. They were like, us coming together. They were like, man, I'm ready for this. I know you're going to have some good questions. But Cody Allen says, how do you think your actions will impact future service members? And I do want to say, I'm not sure if you saw, I believe there was an Army E8 equivalent that did resign or something like that happened, and people are trying to correlate it, but his spouse made this letter. I'm not really sure if you saw that. It was like probably about a month after, but how do you think that will impact other service members?
Time will tell, obviously. I think hopefully we're able to actually, I'm not going to quit. So even though I'm on the outside, my goal for the rest of my life is to bring fundamental change to the military that I love so much, because I think the junior service member deserves it. And I think my play right now is through politics and external pressure on the system. Whereas when I made the statements originally, I was on the inside and it was internal pressure that I was applying. Okay. What impact will it have? That's ultimately a question I would ask back to the service members that are currently serving. That's your decision. All I can do is control what I can control. And right now I'm going to externally apply pressure through other means.
And I would say, like, if junior service members, you know, felt the same way you did, I mean, we all can't just walk out. That's not how this works, right? And people do rely on this paycheck that are E1 to E4 living in the barracks, right? And you respect that, obviously. But
so
I mean,
I had a buddy, his name, he's still in, I'll just say it because he's very smart. His name's Matt Tweedy. He's a major. He was the EWS honor graduate. And he was, when I was at TBS as a warfighting director, he was IEP, which we hand select to be like the top senior captains that
Mhm.
have a lot of knowledge. So this guy is very smart. He just wrote a paper essentially saying everything that I said, but he said it in like a law degree dense tone, and they published it in like War on the Rocks. And so he and I were just texting because we see things a lot of the same way. Obviously, I took a different approach than he took, but he made a comment that was, I need order of the system. Like, we need order of the system, which is why he disagreed with me. And you know what? He's right. Like, the military system absolutely has to have order. You can't have everybody just flying off at the mouth whenever. And if they do that, then they need to expect to be held accountable in the same manner that I was. But there are exceptional times that require people to speak out, and you have to use your judgment on when that is. But yes, nobody thinks that everyone just saying whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, that's going to be effective. Obviously, that's not going to work. And I didn't get to where I was, a 17-year battalion commander, by just saying whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, right? Obviously, for 17 years, like, I knew how to manage within the system. This was just a deliberate thing that I did, but I acknowledged that the system still needs order.
Caleb Hines says, any issues with job offers since you've gotten out? It's only been a month, if that, right now. I don't think so.
I plan on writing a book. So that's my job. And so I'm not looking for a job. Okay. So I've had some people say, hey, if you need something, reach out to me. I haven't had like a formal offer, but I haven't been looking either. And so, quite honestly, I don't know if I could ever go back and have a boss. Like, never say never. I'm sure if you got to feed the family, there, you'll do whatever you need to do. But like we started the conversation with, I loved being an entrepreneur. And so if after I write this book and I decide not to, go into politics or anything like that, what I'll probably try and do is start a business.
Okay, awesome. So Elias Getty says, what are 3 changes you think the military needs to make to move it in the right direction?
I would tell that person to go look at my post. I'd say there's 5 fundamental issues facing the military that don't have to do with it. So go reference that post, and it does a much better job explaining it than I will right now.
Okay, that's fine. David Hopkins, one of my fellow docs, pinged off some Marines too, some questions, and he has a good one here. Did you have any knowledge prior to the pullout of what was going to happen? Did you know any rumblings, undergrounds of, what was going to come to fruition or not?
No, I had all the rumors of, like, everyone knew that the suicide vest attack was going to happen. Like, I didn't, as AITV battalion commander, no one gave me that information. But what I will say is I was the regimental operations officer before I was a battalion commander, and I put 1-8 out on that deployment. So, like, I was texting them. I mean, their battalion commander actually emailed me on deployment and congratulated me on getting battalion command, right? So I knew 1-8 very intimately, their leadership. And so that struck more of a personal chord for me in that sense.
Okay. And then I actually have to add this. One of my coworkers here, he's more on the criticism side, so I'm going to preface that a little bit. He said, anytime did you voice your concern over the U.S. Taliban deal negotiated and signed by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on February 29th, 2020, that resulted in the release of 5,000 prisoners of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, which is not recognized by the United States as a state and is known as the Taliban, and up to 1,000 prisoners of the other side will be released by March 10th, 2020, the first day of intra-Afghan negotiations, which corresponds to Rajab 1441 on the Hijri lunar calendar and Hoot 1398 on the Hijri solar calendar. Direct quote from the deal. So it sounds like they're releasing prisoners, and were you pretty much his criticism is what I'm getting, like, we're not as reactive to that.
What I'll say to that question, first, if I could answer his question with a question, he's not here, obviously, but what I would ask him is, okay, so your point is that I didn't acknowledge some previous failure. My question would be, but do you acknowledge that the content of my statements were correct in that time? And so I would assume he would say yes, but it's hypocritical because you didn't address this. And I've been given that argument a lot, and I don't agree with it.
Yeah.
Just because, like, you grow up and you have experiences, like, people were asking me, well, why didn't you went to Iraq? Why didn't you challenge George Bush's Iraq invasion? And it's like, I was 23 years old, right? I just wanted to go defend my country. I didn't know, I didn't have the experiences, I didn't have the education. So Have there been many other things that I didn't call for accountability for over the last 17 years of my career? Yeah, they probably happen daily. But that still doesn't mean that when I got to that moment in time, based on my experiences and my education, that what I said in that moment wasn't correct. And just because I didn't address all these other things, I still think like, it's almost like people were like, well, no, you can't say anything now because you didn't say anything about all those other things. And I think that's a very dangerous argument, because there's people all over the place that haven't said anything. The whole military didn't say anything about all those other things. So are we saying all our general officers shouldn't acknowledge fault because they've obviously had a 40-year career and they didn't say anything then, so now we don't want them to say anything? I think it's the opposite. I think we want people to come to a place where they can have the bigger perspective and be objective and step back from maybe their experiences where they didn't say something, and then have the courage to say something.
Do you feel like there are a lot of commanders and things like that, people that are leading military members out here that are looking for just positive answers? Like, just tell me what I want to hear, and that's just what's going on. Is there any way to break that cycle that you can think of?
100%. People do that all the time. Everybody knows the answer to that.
Yeah, but I want to hear it. And I mean, it's such a cultural thing. I'm like, how can we always have to say it in this weird way. Yes, this is negative, but then this is positive. And it's hard because I looked at the vehicles that just sunk, about a year ago. And it's like, I'm sure they were like, this is good, sir, but this is bad. And it's like, we're going to pay attention to the good here. Right. And then eventually you kind of neglect like that. I would call it like the everything drawer in your house, that it's like, there's a lot of bad stuff in the everything drawer. We've just been shoving stuff in there, and eventually it's not going to shut. That's the way I look at it. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Every boss that I've ever worked for has said, I need honest feedback. I want honest feedback. And it's like, what does that mean to you? Because it's different to you as it is to you, as it to you. And so every boss I've ever had, there's a line where you can give honest feedback, and then you'll read through their emotions or their facial expressions or their reaction that you've gone too far. And now you got to peel it back, because there's a line between honest feedback and now you're being a pain in the ass. And then once you're a pain in the ass and you get on their bad side, then you don't get the favorable evaluation report and you don't get promoted. And so you weed yourself out. So you can continue to be a pain in the ass, but you're not going to go very far. And so the question is, like, you want someone that's going to go all the way up to that line and give honest feedback, but there's a threshold for each boss. And some bosses have a very narrow threshold where if you give them any type of negative feedback, you can read through their body language and their reactions that they don't want to hear it. And so
I think it's important to ask this question because you led people. How do you think that you approach things differently? Do you feel like you are like, my threshold is through the roof, right? Where tell me everything bad. I don't care. Tell me if it's bad. Or do you feel like you had your own threshold where, what do you think about that?
I think I would like to believe that my threshold was very wide. Like, I allowed a lot of feedback. But I'm also an aggressive guy. So like, if you come in there with like aggressive feedback, my immediate reaction is to be aggressive back to you. So there is a way to deliver it being honest. But, there's times where the enlisted have just been frustrated and want to lash out. And then I lash back and, we figure it out. And that's just like in any corporate world or life. But I like to my investigation, they didn't ask any junior enlisted Marines who served under me. So, I asked people to go talk to I've been a company commander a ton. I was a battalion commander for a little bit, like literally asked the junior enlisted. And I would submit to you that the vast majority of them would tell you that I was a very tolerant and engaging leader.
I will tell you just my anecdotal evidence. Normally when I talk about somebody, they're like, yeah, I'm all about leadership and being positive. And normally they'll, say it's really not like that, or, whatever, send me that. I didn't really have that with you. So, I'm not saying that's the truth, but I'm just saying I haven't heard anything negative in terms of like how you were before this entire statement. I kind of think people have just judged you for this sliver of time, if so.
I actually posted about that. Like, the amount of people trying to discredit me. And like, after like 4 months, I was like, have you noticed nothing's fallen out of my closet? You know how many people would have loved to dig something up or find some guy that I've wronged or blah, blah, blah. Like, none of that. Like, what does that tell you? Like, I'm actually invested. Like, I actually care. I don't have any skeletons in my closet. Like, this incident was literally the time where I decided that I wanted to take a stand because it was important enough to me.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Stu, I don't have any more questions for you. I appreciate you coming on here, but I want to give you like a second to say anything, like clear anything up that we didn't cover. Is there anything that you think people should know about you as you're going through this journey to kind of move forward, and what your next steps are?
No, for me, I love America. I love Americans. I love the military. This came from a place of love, not a place of I've been wronged or contempt. Like everything I did was because I think America has the greatest military in the world. I think our margin of ability might be degrading on some of the fundamental issues that you can go to my social media and see. I've laid them out. But, everyone gets stuck on our adversaries and their capabilities, like Russia and China. Like, look where they're operating. It's all their borders. They don't have the ability to project military power in the same way America does. But America's gotten into this habit of downplaying our strengths and increasing our enemy's strengths. Quite honestly, I still think we're the best military in the world. That being said, we have fundamental issues that need to be addressed. The biggest one being accountability of our senior leaders to get us back on the track of where we need to be. And then the other thing I just want to end with is, I think going through this ordeal, I saw how slanted the mainstream media was. And so it was hard. Like I'd make a statement and you could just literally see the different sides of the news organizations spinning it to their narrative. And so I was coming to podcast, YouTube channels. And I think that's why these have taken off, is because they just give a much more honest assessment.
Yeah.
And so I just really appreciate the coverage that you gave me, Nick. And I was happy to come on here because of it. No one expects it to all be positive, but just, reporting it fairly and not through a narrative. And that's what was quality about this show.
Appreciate it. Where can they find you? Obviously you have a website. I'm going to plug it one more time. Give us all the rundown.
AuthenticAmericans.com. And at the bottom, all of my social media is linked. So as I went through this, all I had was a Facebook and LinkedIn. And those are like my biggest followings, but I've created all the others. And so if they're not linked to my account, it's still a fake account, but you can validate my social media because it's at the bottom of my website. And then the other one was votesforvets.org, of a coalition of candidates. So if you're interested in getting in politics, reach out through that website. We've got a whole training regimen and we've got districts that we can throw you in and arm and equip you. So yeah, that's it.